See me. Okay, well, good morning. Not everything's working here. I had worked very hard to get it all set up so you could see all of Edinburgh Castle in its magnificent glory on this lovely sunny cold day, but I can't do a live with my camera, with my phone horizontally, so having set it all up just right, I'm now going to move things around, but I'll just get on with it and make do with what I can see here, which I hope is going to work for you too. So it's the second one. I'm doing these sessions in the hope that there will be children who want to watch them and either draw along with them or get the ideas from what I demonstrate on drawing with different materials. So I did this for the first one. This was ink and wash. I started with ink lines, dipping my stick into undiluted ink, drawing lines, then I diluted the ink with water and put on wash. I also put on some wax. So I started with the lines. This time I'm going to take a different approach and start with the wash. So no lines, putting down blocks of wash with my bits of sponge. So I've got a bit of sponge there. I've got a tray of wash, which is the undiluted ink. No, it's the diluted ink. And I'm going to draw without any lines. Now I know often when people do this sort of thing, working with wash or watercolour, they quite like to have a few guidelines to see exactly where they're going to draw or paint. But I recommend you don't put down your guidelines. You draw with your bit of sponge, and because of this lovely sunny day, a lot of Edinburgh Castle is just a dark shape against a light sky. So that's what I'm going to work with first, and because I've not got any outlines, this is going to be approximate. It means that none of my drawing will be defined, other than the light shape against the dark shape against the light background, the light sky. But then I will introduce some definition as I go. So that's the kind of shape that I see. probably, I mean, if you've been drawing Edinburgh Castle already yourselves, you might have done it with me, or you may have been drawing it in other situations, you'll know it's very complicated. There are all these different walls and they don't really line up very well. So to start just with a dark shape, an overall kind of silhouette, I can then introduce some of those lines. I look with my eyes half closed to see the dark shape, but then if I want to work out what lines are important, what needs to be defined, I can add that afterwards. I can open my eyes and see a little bit more. So actually that's all I'm going to do to this one for now. I'm going to let it dry and then I'm going to draw on top of it. So I'll take that away and leave it to dry. In fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm next to a bench covered in frost, so while that's wet I might just leave it on the frosty bench. Sometimes you get some very exciting effects as the wash freezes. So put that aside to dry, and I'm going to do a new one. Same approach. Maybe this time, because as I explained, I'm not able to put my phone on its side to do the live. I can't show you the whole castle, but I might in my drawing this time do the whole castle. So if I just show you from there around to there, it's a really spectacular sight. So let's do another one while the first one dries, and that's again how I suggest you work. So if I want to get the whole castle, I should do something like that. That's the kind of general shape. And this time I'm going to leave a few more gaps. But I want to get from there, over here is the first main building. So these are drawings that are going to take time to be finished. I'm getting some first shapes down with the wash and the sponge, and as I've said, the idea is that I can't be too definite about what I do there. I've got to put down something general, and then when it's dry, draw into it. And I'm going to draw into it with lines, the way I did with the previous example. I started with a line and then put the wash or the tone on. But I'll also draw into it when the wash is dry with charcoal and with chalk. So that's quite nice, because it's possible then to introduce some other lighter and darker effects. Now my castle rock comes down to about here, and then we get some great trees which are all a little bit frosty. So I think what I'll do for that is I'll take I have a bit of hand towel. Could be like a rag as well, and where these trees are, I'm going to lift off some of that wash. I'm doing this partly because I know it's going to take time to dry, and maybe while I'm at it I'll lift off some of these walls. I'm doing it fairly generally, as you see. It's so just to introduce a little bit of variation there before it dries. Okay, so I'm going to put that one to dry, and I'll go back to the first one. We'll see if it's dry yet.
Are you speaking?
Yeah, of course.
You're probably good at it.
Well, I'm just starting. Well, I'm going to do more to it, but that's the first stage.
What do the utensils with this thing?
Well, this time I'm doing ink and I've got a bit of charcoal as well. I'll let that dry. Right. I'm going to draw into this one.
Right, okay, buddy.
Alright. So that one is almost dry. You'll probably see some of it when I put the ink on. It may well bleed a little bit. And that's the sort of thing you should try and, you know, decide whether you like it or not. Don't fall over. Okay, so that is my first wash, and I've got a bottle of undiluted ink. So I've got a bottle of Indian ink, and as before I've got some sharpened sticks, and I've also got the end of a paintbrush that I sharpened. I quite liked that before actually. The end of the paintbrush was very, very fine. So let's get going here. So it's always difficult to work out with Edinburgh Castle what's what, but let's see, here we go. So I would have said this before when I took this approach, that those shapes that I began with, they won't be exact. I was just using a bit of sponge, and so it's a much more approximate way of working. But that is to be encouraged. That's a good thing, especially if you find that you're someone who draws too cautiously and you make everything a little bit too tentative. This is a, you know, much more liberating, freer way to work. The sort of thing you don't really need to tell children. They tend to work quite freely. But if you are of an age where you're very careful about your drawing, this is a good thing to try, because you'll see that although the shapes I started with aren't necessarily in exactly the right place, it doesn't matter. In fact, it possibly even adds something to have those two layers not register. And what would be the point then, apart from that, of starting with a wash? Well, it means that actually I don't have to draw everything. There's quite a lot in those blocks of tone, of wash, that are helping explain this dark mass of the castle on the hill. And so when I come in with this paintbrush end and start to draw some of these lines to define parts of the castle, I find I'm actually doing a bit less than I might have done if I started with the line. And with something as complicated as Edinburgh Castle, it's really great if you can do less. I said it last time that, you know, when you look at Edinburgh Castle, it's, especially on a day like this, it's so dramatic up there on the hill with all those amazing rocks and set against the bright sky. So that's what you want to get right. Getting every single window and every single detail of the walls and the ramparts is not what strikes people when they look at Edinburgh Castle, and it's probably not what you really want to be conveying in your drawing. What you hopefully want to convey is the amazing drama of that monument up high. So I've put on some lines there and found a bit of definition in the buildings and the walls. So I'm going to leave this one as well, because when that's dry I can put on some charcoal and some chalk. So maybe I'll do that with the next one, just to show you a different way of working. So you'll see it's all very quick. You know, that's 15 minutes and I've got halfway through 2 drawings. What I like about this speed is that you can produce lots of drawings, and not all of them will be successful, but hopefully some of them will. And if they are successful, they will also have this lovely spontaneous quality. They'll be lively because you've worked quickly and you've worked without too much thinking, basically. It's often better not to think too much when you're drawing. So this was the second one where I put on the wash and I wiped a bit of it back. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on the camera, but I put it on the bench, and the frost actually has made some of that wash. It's created these frost patterns. So that would have been quite a nice thing to develop a bit further, actually. But I won't do it this time, because what I want to do next is draw on top of this with some charcoal and some chalk. So last time I was working with ink and wash, and I also put some wax down to create a resist on the surface of the paper so that the wash wouldn't stain the paper everywhere. This time I've sponged it a bit with my rag, and now I'm going to draw with charcoal. And when the wash is dry, and my wash is nearly dry, it's got a nice tooth to it. So when you draw charcoal lines, for example, it picks it up very easily. So I'm hardly pressing with my charcoal, and it's giving me a nice fluid broken line. And of course the great thing about putting the charcoal on is that if I want to change anything, I can actually rub it off. So I couldn't rub off the ink, but I can rub off the charcoal. So I'm going to draw some lines as I was doing with the ink and stick, and then I'll maybe fill in some darker areas, and I'll also then try some of the chalk. I am getting very confused, this building is. So let's get a bit of dark in for some roofs. So you see it gives it a nice texture, and maybe actually once I get onto these bigger areas, like the rock, it'd be better to use the side of the charcoal. So I'm not going to look at every single rock. So that's a nice surface to work into, and then as I was saying, there are these very subtle kind of frosty looking trees down here, which you almost can't see. So I can put some of that in. I can also smudge it a bit, and then maybe keep on building it up. It's quite good, I think, with the drawing to start to aim to get some black in. And then I think I'll start to be a little bit more definite, just with one or two things. This is all the charcoal, and then I want to try a little bit of chalk as well. So for example, the sun's really coming through up there. I can start to put some bits of chalk. It's a funny yellowy set of chalk. I might try a different one. So I want to work along some of the edges here as well. We've got a completely clear sky. In fact, it's a shame that I didn't bring some pastel, because I think it would have been good to get a bit of colour up there. There's not so much happening in here with light. We've only got light on the front there. Now maybe just try a little bit of light on these trees. See how that will do. I think what I need is just a lot more dark, actually. Build that up a little bit stronger. And just hatching across it. And I'll work that in a little bit more. And then if I've brought a rubber, no, didn't bring a rubber. Oh well. I would have rubbed into that with the rubber. Okay, so what are we getting now? A little bit stronger down here, and then let's go on to the other one. Yeah, well, some good things happening there. I'm sorry I don't have a rubber, because I would have drawn into that. So let's go back to the first one. This is number 2. Okay, the first one looks a bit promising. I think without the rubber. I think my second one was in need of something extra. So what's going on in the first one is I've now got these quite crisp, dark ink lines, which I have to say I like, but I'm going to blot them just in case some of them aren't dry. As I say, I generally be trying to leave this long enough for it to dry, but now what I would really like to do is to bring together these dark ink lines with the wash, sort of meet them in the middle, and I'm going to use my charcoal for that. So there are, for example, some really dark roofs, some of the walls some of the walls darker than others, and as I've said, because of this surface that you get from the wash, there's a bit of a tooth to it, and so it picks up the charcoal quite nicely. So for the walls I'm going along the way, I'm getting a kind of, hopefully a sort of wall pattern, and then as I've done before, I'll do something different using the side of the charcoal when we get to the rocks. Build up different textures to distinguish those two different areas. Now that's going to fall over again. Fall over. And I haven't put any chalk on this yet, but I think I'll do that now. And I'll put some chalk. And there's just a bit of light up there. It's also quite nice. Maybe I'll get a bit of chalk in the sky generally. I'll work along the edge. It's such a clear sky. It might be quite interesting. It might help the drawing to get a little bit of contrast up there. bit of smudging. What's happening with the drawing is because that wash is still a bit wet. I can't actually smudge charcoal, and I maybe wouldn't have been able to have rubbed it off if I wanted to. So that's nearly me done, I think. I think the drawing works quite nicely in there, all that combination of, let me bring it a bit closer, the combination of the ink, sharp ink lines, the wash bringing it together, and then the layers of chalk and charcoal. So there's something working in there. It would have been nice to have gone a bit lower maybe and done something interesting down here with the trees. Okay, so I think that should be my time now. I'll do another one of these next week. I'm trying to do one a week, and Edinburgh's got such a great variety of places to draw. Next time I'll do some work with charcoal and with pastel on top of charcoal, which I think is another interesting combination. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and cheerio.